Hey, everybody, real quick before we get into today's show, great Buffalo Bills conversation with my guest, recurring guest, good friend of mine, Anthony Marino. I want to let you know right here at the very top before you dive into the show that we had some significant internet connection issues with this taping. We do our show when I have Anthony on remotely, like always, and usually the internet's pretty good, but every now and then, you're going to get some internet issues when you have these type of podcasts. And unfortunately, at times anyway, some internet connectivity issues definitely took place. There's some portions on the video side, at least anyway, where you can see Anthony's video freezing up. There's some portions where the sound would get cut off. You know how it goes on the internet when it's kind of going in and out. There's a couple quick moments in this episode where his sound is kind of going out. In fact, there's one point where he completely disappears on the video side from the feed. Fortunately, we were able to go to a commercial. Then when we came back, something was up on the audio side with his internet as well. So I just want to let you know that the production quality of today's episode, both on the video side, also the audio side, depending on how you're consuming this, not the greatest, but this was a really good conversation. Pretty much all Buffalo Bills. It's been a hot minute, couple weeks since I've had Anthony on. So I just wanted to kind of forewarn you ahead of time so you don't get frustrated with parts of the audio or the video. Or if you do get frustrated, at least don't say that I didn't warn you. So on that note, enjoy this episode of Talking Buffalo.
Welcome to Talking Buffalo, featuring conversations with guests from around the world of sports, media, pop culture, and all things Buffalo, with your host, Patrick Moran.
All right, what is going on, everybody? How you doing? Welcome to another episode of Talking Buffalo, your weekday daily driver for Buffalo sports talk and more. My name is Patrick Moran. Big thank you, as always, to everybody out there for watching, for listening, for following, for subscribing. I do appreciate y'all very much. This is our Thursday show, and I'm excited because it has been, to be honest with you, a hot minute since I've been able to have on my guy, my good friend, recurring guest, Anthony Marino. He's with me tonight, though. What's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Hey, man, it's good to be back. And yeah, I know. I feel like, gosh, so much has taken place since we last chatted. So there's a lot to catch up on.
Life happens. Anthony has been a busy man. A lot has happened with the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk about that today. We're not quite into the week of the season opener. We're almost there, though. It's getting real close, so close. You could probably taste it. Anthony has been on with me since last season, almost weekly, most of the time weekly anyway. And we have had a tough task to fill probably since, when the offseason comes, you get a couple things here and there, but then you just get that downtime where nothing seems to happen. Not the case anymore. Before we actually talk about Buffalo Bills, like how excited are you again? And I know you've had a very hectic summer on a lot of levels, but now we're about a week and a couple days away from the start of the Buffalo Bills regular season. We're literally just 1 week away from the start of the NFL kickoff on Thursday night. What's your excitement level at right now? Or again, has it kind of been, just so many things going on, you really haven't had a chance to sit down and digest it much yet?
It is, it's crept up on me a bit, right? And a lot of things going on and all good things. As I say that, right? I don't want people thinking anything like that. But all of a sudden, it's like, I got my one main fantasy football draft auction tomorrow night, and I'm like, I have never felt less prepared than I have before. But I think with a lot of this, Pat, and it's interesting because now as Bills fans, it's like the team is good. We expect them to be good. We are not hanging on every update from training camp to be like, what did EJ Manuel look like today? Or what did AJ McCarron do? Or what was Kevin Cobb up to? Or Josh Allen's, rookie year, where you're just literally hanging on any update to see that you could be good and just hoping that you have that breakthrough. I mean, it's almost to that point as a fan base. It's like, okay, like, yeah, this team is good. So it's the excitement is there, but it's a little bit different. And at least in my mind, of opening day does not seem to be as important as it was in the past, because it always used to be that, like, that eternal hope, right? It's like, oh, it's opening day. Everybody's 0-0. Right now, you're kind of just like, well, no, it's like these games are fine. They better beat the Cardinals. They better take care of the Dolphins in week 2. You know, all those things that you expect. But it's a lot different from where we were 5 years ago to where we are today. And I'd rather be feeling this way. Not that you have to be hanging on every report. So it feels a little bit more casual, but it's going to be great. I mean, obviously, for everyone to be there in Orchard Park for the opener against the Cardinals, like, it's going to be electric.
So basically what you're saying is it's not like being a Pittsburgh Pirates fan. Yeah, everyone starts 0-0 before the season starts, but it's just a matter of time. You're not just hoping, that things go well. You expect them to go well. Last season was a good example of what you're talking about. This team just, you can sit here and analyze it to death, but yeah, this team's just good. I mean, they were 6-6 last year, ended up winning the division, ended up getting the number 2 seed in the AFC East. You don't do that if your team is if it's not good. So the 53-man roster was set initially on Tuesday. We're recording this pretty late into Wednesday night. Nothing significant happening, but the practice squad stuff came out. But anyway, again, and I know you've been busy, but what was your impressions of the initial 53-man roster? Like, what were your thoughts? Were there anything specifically that you liked about some of the decisions that they made? Was there anything specifically about maybe a couple of things that you didn't like? Were there any major surprises with this? Again, initial, I say that because it's fluid. Things could change over the next handful of days. But as things stand right now, likes, dislikes, surprises, where you at?
The biggest surprise to me, I guess, was Casey Tuhill. But, like, you go through, you're just like, all right, well, like, Kingsley Jonathan made the practice squad. So it's like 6 of one, half dozen of another, no big deal. My biggest takeaway from everything with this, it comes to the Buffalo Bills keeping 5 wide receivers on the 53-man roster. And it's like, no offense to our buddy Jeremy White from WGR in the morning show, I'm done with the wide receiver train. Like, talking about the obsessing over this. The Buffalo Bills do not care about wide receivers the way that we do as a fan base, that, this group on social media and all the obsession over that. So it's like, for me, it becomes more of a piece. I mean, even them just keeping 5 wide receivers, right? Moving on from your boy Chase Claypool, Tyrell Shavers, who all these things were said about, like, not taking a flyer there, or KJ Hamler for kind of what he could bring to pieces. Again, you got Hamler and Shavers on the practice squad. That's fine. But it's not a piece that, at least this season, is that important to them. So it's like, I'm done obsessing with it. If they do something and make a major move next year, I'll be all for it. If they trade for a big name or sign a big name, or, use another marquee draft pick to get a wide receiver, I will be all for it. But until then, it's like, spare me until it actually happens.
So they kept 5 last year as well. The difference was, though, last year with the 5 that they kept, they were special teams guys. Like, Trent Sherfield was a core special teams player. Deontay Hardy was a special teams player. He was the return guy. Khalil Shakir played some special teams last year. I don't think he's going to be playing much special teams this year. You look at the 5 they kept, and as things stand right now, at least anyway, 2 of those 5, MVS and Keon Coleman, have 0 value on special teams, which, that's surprising. And again, I don't know how much, because Shakir is so much more an important part of his offense. I don't know that you even risk him on special teams. You are right about the players, and it didn't kind of ultimately end up mattering as fans, because you look at guys that were on the bubble, Tyrell Shavers, KJ Hamler, lots of guys who ultimately didn't make the team, but they were brought back to Kingsley Jonathan. But it means a lot to the players. I got to say this, because my good friend Damone Harris from UB has been with Atlanta, and he was literally one of the final cuts. He had an awesome preseason, really good training camp. He had the highest PFF grade of anyone on the defense. And I found out he was literally one of their final cuts. He was brought back to the practice squad. So I'm like, yes. On one hand, it's like, you're still in the NFL. You're on the practice squad. You could get called up. You can get elevated. And he's in year 7. That's awesome. On the other hand, looking at the numbers, it costs him about $44,000 a week to be on the practice squad as opposed to, being on the game day active roster. So financially, for the players, it means a ton. Now, if they get elevated, they'll get a game day NFL check for that week. This is all prorated and stuff like that. But pretty wild. Like when you look at it from that, it depends how you look at it. If you look at it as a fan and just a team, if you look at it from the player's perspective, it could get wild.
Well, and I was listening to Buffalo Plus earlier, and Mike Catalana, Cottrell, and Dan Fates, and they were saying like how much they hate this day, right? Because it's like they make the cuts, you go through these pieces, as fans, it's great content, it's something for us to talk about. But for some of these guys, like this was their last chance to play in the NFL, or their only chance, right? For some of these guys. And you just think to it like as you go through, you're put in a tough spot. Like someone had said earlier, Eli Anku had other options, but he wanted to stay in Buffalo. I remember the story with him last year when he got signed off the Bills practice squad, went down to Atlanta, like how just difficult that is. Like, you don't just move from Buffalo to Atlanta overnight,
right.
But guess what? You got to move from Buffalo to Atlanta overnight. And you think about those things for those players, it's it's not tough. And I'm sure someone's probably listening right now, like, mocking me for siding with these guys that, have these careers as professional athletes, but whatever. It is not about the marquee quarterbacks and franchise players and the ones that we all know. It's for these guys like Damone, right? Going into year 7 and trying to do, whatever he can to make a good impression. Hopefully he gets elevated a few weeks, or maybe the chance to get called up to someone's 53-man roster. But it's tough, man. It really is. And when you think about it, some of those fan favorite types, like, last year we spent a lot of time talking about Andy Isabella. Bills didn't keep him even on the practice squad this year, right? So like, here's a guy that, probably will end up someplace else. But there's a lot of people that find themselves in that category, like, not sure what they're going to do tomorrow. That might be 20-something years old. Like that's weird.
Yeah, it is. And like say somebody like Damone too, it's the little things when you look at it from a player perspective and not just the overall team. Like they traded a couple weeks ago for Matthew Judon, and everyone was like, "Oh, he's going to Atlanta." My reaction was shit because he's playing that position. I was like, "This is going to hurt him." Ultimately, it did. For sure, there's a human element to it. I like Justin Shorter. Nice dude. I was rooting for him. Doesn't even make the practice squad. Who knows if he's going to catch on? This might be the end of the road. So to your point about the Buffalo Plus crew saying how they hate this day, because they're humanizing people that they've spent some time with throughout, the season or multiple years at training camp, practices, post-game, stuff like that. They get to know some of those players. As far as people who say, Anthony, the preseason don't mean shit. All right, Joe from Queens, classic one. I kind of go back and forth because you could take two players that are on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And if you want to say, the preseason don't mean shit, I present to you Casey Toohill because he did quite literally nothing all summer, barely got on the field, didn't play. I don't even think he played in the preseason. If it was the last game, he didn't do anything. He was kind of buried on the depth chart. I didn't even hear about anything regarding his special teams prowess, but he ends up making a team over Kingsley Jonathan, who I thought had an excellent camp and an excellent preseason. And Casey Toohill gets the calls. You can look at it. Okay, Joe from Queens, the people like that in the world are right. Well, it don't mean shit. Then I look at our guy, Joe Andreon, and I'm like, he quite literally made this football team because of, for sure, one and probably two preseason games where he was just absolutely outstanding and it matched the story and all that stuff. Because I think about it, Anthony. So you've been busy lately, so you haven't been on much like during the preseason you haven't been on. But, we talked for OTAs and mini camps and going right up to camp and a couple times in camp. I thought the dude's name was Joe Anderson about halfway through training camp. I'm being completely honest with you, and that's embarrassing to say as a Buffalo person, who roots for UB guys in the league. I was saying Joe Anderson a couple times. I even bothered to mention him, but Joe Andreon does show you that preseason football ultimately could mean a lot. It's just crazy depending on what side you look at.
No, it is totally crazy. And I think with some of it too, going back to Casey Toohill, and I was listening to Joe Marino earlier. I think Sal had some stuff on Twitter that I caught quickly. It does seem like maybe a loop hill worked in Toohill's advantage because Kingsley Jonathan is eligible for the International Pathways program, which means you can put him right to the practice squad. It means that he's not subject to waivers or something that he can be scooped up by another team. So when you look at that loophole, that's kind of a tough nut for him to have to deal with when it comes to that situation, if that's the case. But it's like you can kind of keep both of those guys, protect yourself a little bit, and who knows? Like I don't think we've seen the last of Kingsley Jonathan on the Bills 53-man roster, just personally, based on who the guy is. And I think this might be one of those situations that again, they could kind of work the system a little bit and keep him. But that's kind of speculation, but just was listening to that before I jumped on with you.
Yeah, he doesn't count against the 16-man practice squad. So technically with him, they're going to have 17 people on the practice squad. Look, I know you're a Ted Lasso guy. You are a sucker for a good story. And
season 4 though.
Yeah. That's right. You did tweet about that. Not going to be Ted though, right? It's going to be who's going to Roy's going to be on it. There's three main characters.
I don't think they've said anything. They haven't said definitively if he's back or not yet. But
okay. Either way, more detail. I'll be pumped to watch it one way or the other. But I'm getting back to Joe Andreon, man. You love a good story. You love to see it. I saw this picture I got on the video side floating around. This is Joe Andreon 2 short years ago, tailgating a Bills game with a Matt Milano jersey on, and now he's playing for the Buffalo Bills. There was another picture of him being a young kid being held by his father, and he's got a Tequila Spikes jersey on, and now he's playing for that team. I'm a sucker for a good story, too. And, I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. Everyone's comparing him to, like, Rudy. I hate that comparison, by the way. I talked about this on social media. I like Rudy. I'm a Notre Dame guy, but Rudy was an undersized, very little talent, kind of shitty defensive end who persevered through 4 years, was basically a water boy, 9th string. He got to play one snap his senior year at the very end because the team went to bat for him, yada, yada, yada. Joe Andreon straight up made this team because he's a good football player, and he made football plays against starters when they played the Pittsburgh Steelers, among other reasons. But just regardless of whether he's just a special teams guy, whether he's inactive or not, whether he ultimately gets cut and ends up on the practice squad, whatever it may be, to make this football team is unbelievably an incredible feel-good story, man. And I can't get over it in a positive way too.
Well, and I'm not one of those people that have made the comparison to Rudy, so don't put me in your crosshairs. But you get where that comparison can be made, right? I mean, the guy grows up loving Notre Dame football, gets his opportunity. The guy grows up loving the Buffalo Bills football. I mean, these pictures that you show, the things that you've seen to get this opportunity, it's that storybook piece where you're able to make that type of a comparison, right? And even along the, what was it called? Invincible, like the Vince Papil story that Mark Wahlberg started.
Yeah.
Those types of things where you go from being the fan to literally being on the team. But your point is well taken, right? From his athleticism to what he was able to do on the field to the fact that, hey, he had to try out with the Kansas City Chiefs beforehand, then coming in with the Bills and proving that it's just like, all right, he can play a little bit. So I'm not expecting to see him active on game days or those pieces, but the way injuries work and things like that, you're going to see him on that field at some point this season. And, that's the guy that you have leading the team out of the tunnel, Highmark Stadium will erupt when he comes through.
I wouldn't.
A phenomenal
Sure.
moment.
Sure. And look, Braylon Spector, all due respect to him staying healthy is a pretty big chore. So I wouldn't be shocked to see Joe Andreon get an opportunity sooner than later. And by the way, that's wild. I did not know it until I had Andy Young on from Spectrum Sports a couple of weeks ago. Did a show on Imperial Pizza. I don't know if that was public knowledge or was out there for whatever reason. I didn't know that though. Not only did Joe Andreon obviously not get drafted, not only did he not go unsigned right after the draft as an undrafted free agent, but he tried out for the Kansas City Chiefs a week before, and they did not sign him to their 90-man roster. And then he tried out for the Buffalo Bills. That's fate. All that's fate, man. And then that Pittsburgh game, the weather sucks. So Terrell Bernard's, they're not taking no chances with him, especially after Milano goes down. Braylon Spector is hurt, and there's your opportunity. Like if that weather's sunny and Matt Milano don't get hurt a couple of days before that, their starters are playing. He doesn't see the field, not in the first quarter anyway, against starters from Pittsburgh to make that impression. So I truly believe in that. Fate did kind of play a role in him making his football team.
No, absolutely. And again, it's been a great story. I'm kind of like holding my breath with it just a little bit because, it's always guys get cut, waiver claims, I realize that at this point right now, like the waiver claims going through, but I just really want to see this. Really want to see this happen. I think everybody does.
So do I. The only thing about the Bills' 53-man roster that I didn't like, and it ultimately may not end up mattering anyway, is I think Mitch Trubisky stinks. I just think he's shot. Every practice I went to, I thought Shane Buechele was better than him, and that's not saying much. That's a low bar. I thought he was terrible in practices. I thought it was even worse in the preseason, and he was banged up. I thought for sure, especially once we heard that Mike White was getting signed, which he is signed with the Bills on the practice squad. It might just be a matter of time, but I actually prefer Mike White to Mitch Trubisky. I think Mitch Trubisky's awful.
Well, I mean, Mike White, there's at least a sample size of seeing him play some good NFL football as a backup and spot starter for the Jets a couple of seasons ago.
And
so
he's tough because Matt Milano almost killed him.
Well, I don't think we've seen him do too much since Matt Milano almost killed him. So I'll be curious, kind of what effect lingers when it comes to that piece. But yeah, I mean, with Trubisky, and my thing is, it's like there was so much conversation around the backup quarterback, and it does go to look at how far we've come, right? Like if we're complaining about the backup quarterback, if that's the main thing that we're complaining about this offseason, and we're complaining about Tyrell Shavers and whether or not Joe Andreon should make the team and Tyler Bass, we've come a long way. We've come a long way. I've watched Thad Lewis in training camp and hoping that he could be something good. That is pathetic. We've all lived through Nathan Peterman. So, with this, I could give two hoots about freaking Mitch Trubisky. Whatever, man. If Josh Allen goes down, you're kind of screwed anyway, whether it's Mitch Trubisky, Mike White, Kyle Allen, Case Keenum, whatever random you want to pick. It is what it is. So I spent about this much time worrying about Mitch Trubisky because I remember 2 years ago, friends of mine on Facebook, Case Keenum looking awful in a preseason game, and they're literally losing their minds over Case Keenum. And it's I have better things to do with my time. So
I agree with you on a large scale because if Josh goes down, they're done. Just like if Mahomes goes down, the Chiefs are done. But if you miss 2 to 3 weeks, give me a quarterback who can go 2-1 over 3 games. And and that might end up coming into play. Obviously, I hope it doesn't. You mentioned Nate Peterman. Did you cringe a little bit earlier this week when he was released? Anytime a player gets cut, we always got our opinions on social media. Oh, sign the Bills or sign him or don't sign him. But you get that little bit of that momentary Nate Peterman cringe. The Bills are looking for somebody.
This is where I think my inner Joe from Queens comes out. I really wanted the Bills to sign him.
Yeah.
Just to see people lose their minds on social media. It's and Nathan Peterman, again, he could be a a Kyle Allen, a whatever, like you're good in the locker room, you're probably great in meetings, you're a good scout team quarterback, all this type of stuff. Could you imagine what Twitter would have been like if the Bills signed Nathan Peterman, even to the practice squad? That I would have just enjoyed seeing, because it would have been I would have had that mute button out real quick, man. It would have been would have made for a fun night.
It would have been fun. Let's take a quick break. Come back. You put out a tweet a couple of days ago. I want to pull it up and discuss it. Two positions on this football team that I think we went into camp hoping to learn a lot more about, but at least to this point, I think most people would agree with this too. We haven't really learned anything about these positions. And it was a good point that you brought up. We're going to discuss it right after this break. All right, I am back here with Anthony Marino talking Buffalo Bills, of course, today on this Thursday show. So you put out a tweet, and you are not a man of many tweets, so to speak, especially not lately, but you put one up, and I actually thought this was really interesting. I'm going to read it, and then kind of we'll discuss this a little bit. You said the two things we hope to learn about wide receiver and safety, we really didn't learn about. Injuries kept us from learning anything about the safety position. Wide receivers really didn't get a chance to do anything in the preseason, which I was fine with. Let's go here. Let's start with I want to talk about both of them. Let's talk about the wide receivers first. You said you really haven't learned anything, in part because, like you said, the preseason, they didn't do much. They didn't play much either. Josh Allen only played a series and a couple on a second series. The entire preseason weather in Pittsburgh played a little bit of a role in that as well. But what do you feel about the wide receiver position right now? Now, I know you talked about this a little bit at the top, like you're off the wide receiver train. You said that at the beginning. But how disappointed are you right now that you really haven't learned anything more about this unit? At least that's the way it feels right now than, say, about a month or so ago before training camp started.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, we talked about it so much, right? And you look at this piece. Now, there's the part of me where, I'm fine with it. And I kind of said this before too, right? Like in a previous episode. We all hate preseason football, but the weeks leading up to it, you're just so starved and waiting for football. This year was a little different because we did have the Olympics to kind of fill that sports void, at least for myself, that it was like, oh, preseason football. Like, all right, let me put this on the calendar and tune in. But at the end of the day, I don't want to see Khalil Shakir out there playing for more than one series, or Keon Coleman or Curtis Samuel or anybody that matters for that sake of the matter. Josh Allen, right? Like, we're not going to learn anything about the wide receivers with Mitch Trubisky and them running a vanilla offense. So I'm fine with things are, right? Like, I understand like what Joe was saying with you the other day. Like, yeah, from a talent standpoint, if Stephon Diggs was still there, would you feel better about the lineup right now? Yeah, from a talent standpoint, you definitely would. But I look at it when it comes to the wide receivers, it's more like, all right, this is a little bit of that Green Bay Packers mold that you have right now, right? Everyone's got a relatively high floor. We don't know too much about their ceiling yet, and that's fine. The piece is where it's just like when everyone talks about the passing game and what it is, you can't leave Dalton Kincaid out of the discussion. And I don't say that meaning like, oh, he's kind of like a half wide receiver. No, I just mean like as a pass catcher, as someone that's going to probably get over 100 targets, probably going to catch at least 80 balls and be your number one weapon when it comes to the passing game. Like, I can't look past that piece. So it's like, oh, if you want to talk about the Ravens and what they have, it starts with Mark Andrews. If you want to talk about the Chiefs, obviously it starts with Travis Kelce. Looks like Dalton Kincaid's going to be that for the Bills. So to me, it's less about what the wide receivers are. We didn't learn anything, like just be good. But all my eggs are in Dalton Kincaid's basket.
Completely understood. Here's how I feel about the Bills wide receivers right now. Going into training camp, I think I liked the collection of this receivers more than the average Bills fan did. I felt pretty good about this unit going into camp. You got you get Curtis Samuel, you got a rookie wide receiver, a second round pick. I talked up the MBS signing. I talked down the Chase Claypool signing, which didn't amount to anything. That's a weird thing, by the way. Anthony, I don't want to get off track here, but I can't help myself. I was at a training camp practice, and while the Bills were practicing, Chase Claypool, I think it might have been the last actual practice of camp. They're off to the side, a handful of guys doing individual drills. And Chase Claypool's running the ladder laterally. He's, doing side work stuff. And he looked really good. And I was mistaken. I got the numbers mixed up because Matt Collins got hurt, a minor injury, but he didn't practice that game and he didn't play that first preseason game. I'm like, Matt Collins is fine. He's out there. He'll be out. He'll be back by early next week. Turns out it was actually Chase Claypool who was out there. And then you don't play in the game. And then he got cut or IR'd and then released as a settlement. I was really surprised because, he was kind of the talk of OTAs and he never really got a chance during training camp to do anything. So that really surprised me. But he was part of the picture. My point was, I was higher than most, I think, on this group going in. But I'm going to be honest with you. From what I saw in training camp and in the preseason a little bit as well, anyway, I'm pumping the brakes just a little bit here. I'm a little concerned about Curtis Samuel having turf toe. I mean, he should be back for week 1. Hopefully he will be, and it doesn't linger, but that's a concern. I saw some great highlight plays from Keon Coleman, but, a little inconsistent, getting some separation. And again, maybe this is where preseason don't mean shit, and I'm going off Mitch Trubisky throwing him the football. I get all that. Little greener, though, a little more raw than I anticipated he would be. And MBS, I was high on MBS coming in, and he was straight up a non-factor in camp and the preseason, and he's got a sore neck now. So I don't know, man. I'm with you because I think if the Bills passing game is going to be good, it's got to be because Dalton Kincaid is great. I'm not down on the wide receivers, but I'm pumping my brakes on the optimism that I had in early July for them.
Yeah, and it's okay to do that too, right? Like with anything. And I think it's just natural. Like, okay, we've talked about it so much and we've seen really nothing, right? You get training camp updates. You'll get a 15-second video clip of a highlight that, can be exciting. That's all fine.
Sure.
It won't be until next Sunday that you actually get to feel something real about it. And of course, Keon Coleman, that's the guy that, okay, let's see what he can do. Like, I think he can do some really good things. I say this, and some people might be like, don't say that name, but it's like, is he Gabe Davis with better hands?
Yeah.
So like when you talk about that, it's like, and people can be like, oh, Gabe Davis. Well, all right. It was really the drops that were a piece that really got to people. You saw the flashes. It's like, okay, if he can be a more consistent version of him, I think I'm going to be okay with that. Right.
Yeah.
Like, because you got a Curtis Samuel, you got Khalil Shakir, you got those guys that are incredibly reliable. Of course, Dalton Kincaid should be too. I know people don't love when you talk about Dawson Knox, but like Dawson Knox is no slouch when it comes to this either. So it's, it's a strength in numbers, but yeah, it's, I'm not like crazy optimistic, but I'm also not looking at it like I'm not worried about it. Let me put it that way.
Sure. And look, again, we're overreacting or we're waiting for something to happen. Keon Coleman might have 6 catches for 84 yards and a touchdown on Sunday, and we'll be anointing him as a Pro Bowler, come about a week and a half from now. I completely get that. But with the receivers, it's kind of wait and see. They were out there with the exception of Claypool. You just really didn't see anything. To your point, which I completely agreed with, the disappointing thing about the safeties is that's a very important position to the Bills. It's a new position because for years and years and years, it's been Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde. Neither of them are here anymore. And you get into camp, and within a couple days, Bishop's hurt. Mike Edwards is hurt. DeMar Hamlin gets hurt before the preseason's over as well. Too many injuries. Like, we didn't really learn anything about this position right now. Even just being able to get some practice clips or vanilla preseason plays or whatever. It's a concern, obviously, going into the season. And yeah, I don't feel like I know anything more about the safety position right now than I did 6 or 7 weeks ago.
Yeah, and honestly, that was probably the one compelling storyline of the preseason and training camp that, we kind of got robbed from, right? Like, that was going to be the one competition for a starting position. And early on,
Literally.
it's like, Hey, you got the free agent who comes over from the Chiefs. You got DeMar Hamlin. Like, hey, you talk about great stories like him getting through last season and being able to show that, like, I'm more than a feel-good story. Cole Bishop, a second-round pick. Like, all right, you got like a three-way competition, and it was over before it started, and over before it started because you didn't even get to experience it. So it's like that piece. You almost look and just think to yourself, God, can we just get a little bit of that Terrell Bernard like magic from one of these guys that, you talk about the preseason and training camp not mattering. Like, can this be that example and someone can just step up? But that was the one. And, training camp and the preseason, like those position battles, that's what makes it fun. Not position battles, the starting battles, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, here we are debating who's going to be the 53rd man, on the roster. Like, at the end of the day, that guy's probably inactive on game day. But when you talk about starting positions, that's what's supposed to be fun, and we got none of it.
What's funny is, so the Bills have a game. This is a Thursday podcast. The Bills got a game in 10 days, and you said the competition was over before it started. I would say that I still don't know who the hell the starting safety is going to be. If Mike Edwards is practicing now, I don't know how close Cole Bishop is or DeMar Hamlin. Like, if Mike Edwards gets 3 or 4 practices in over the next week, but DeMar's good to go next week, does DeMar Hamlin start week 1? Is it him getting the nod over Mike Edwards? We still don't know shit right now when it comes to this position. It's wild, and it really makes you appreciate so much more. At least me, it does. How valuable it was to just have these are your 2 safeties, and they're going to be really good, and you don't have to worry about any of this shit. Who your guys are, man. What a treat that we got from 21 and 23 through all these years. Quick sidebar, by the way. I know you saw the news or whatever, if it's even news, but ESPN had a poll, 103 NFL players polled, most overrated player in the NFL, and the winner was Josh Allen. He had the edge over Jalen Hurts and Tua. He had 11 votes out of 103, but according to ESPN's player poll, he is the most overrated player, also the biggest trash talker. He won that as well, which Josh tweeted about that. He was pretty excited about being the number 1 trash talker. He actually made a comment about that. What do you look? And again, I mean, hey, these are players who are saying this. So, I mean, I don't know how to kind of treat this. Obviously, still take it with a grain of salt. Maybe some jealous people there in the NFL. I don't know, but come on, dude. That has got to be one of the more ridiculous things that I've ever heard. Anyone, fan, media, player, I don't give a shit, coach, who you are. Josh Allen, the most overrated player in the NFL. Come on, Anthony. Come on.
I feel like when it comes to takes on Josh Allen, there's a lot of people that watched week 1 Monday Night Football against the Jets last year and then never watched the Bills play again. I can't think of another way to sum this up when I read things like this. And listen, we can all debate. If you're a Bengals fan, you're like, I would take Burrow over Josh Allen. And if you're a Ravens fan, you're taking Lamar, and everyone's got their guy, and that's all fine and good, right? Like, I would not trade Josh Allen for any player in the NFL, including Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
I would not, right? Because I think it's like, it's a combination of everything that goes in, and that's not what you're asking me, so I shouldn't go down that road. But the point is, it's like with this stuff, it's just like, this is just idiotic. It's just idiotic. And it's like, you go through these things, it's like, I don't know who you're picking with this, what that comes about. Like, that's fine. LeBron James, I thought, had a fantastic tweet where he was like, the game plan is, that he's at the top of the list when it comes to how you're going to handle the Bills and what they're doing offensively. I'm paraphrasing, but you guys get the gist. So it's just like these top 100 lists, these types of polls, all of these things, they are just not for me. And I don't know if I'm just getting too old for this stuff. Like, I'm not going to jump on Twitter and fight with people and whatever, but it's idiotic. And it's like, when you bring the footballs out on September 8th, tell me who's overrated. So
last weekend I was at a family reunion party. Okay. I was in New
Yeah.
Jersey, and a Jets fan came up to me, big Jets fan, and said, kind of laughed about it. Oh, honestly, I think Josh Allen's a little bit overrated. This is how I would answer this question. And then you tell me if this sounds like an overrated player. Would you agree? Is it reasonable to say, Anthony, that right now, as things stand, this Buffalo Bills team right now today has an incredibly realistic chance of not only winning their division, but winning the AFC, getting to and winning the Super Bowl? You would agree that's feasible, that's realistic, correct?
Correct.
Sure. Okay. Now take Josh Allen away. Roster one, or player 1 through 52, 53 on this team, they're good. I don't think this is a top 5 roster in the NFL. I think there's a lot of teams that have more star players than the Buffalo Bills. And, you could say, well, if the quarterback goes down for a lot of teams, they'd be screwed. But I don't think this roster, it's not the best Bills roster that we've seen during the Josh Allen era. I think they've had on paper, for sure, better rosters. I don't even think that's a debate. 2-3 years ago, this roster on paper was a lot better than it is right now. So I would say you got Josh Allen on your team. You got a legitimate chance to win the Super Bowl. You take away the quarterbacks for every team, you just go the rest of the roster. I don't think the Bills are a Super Bowl caliber team. And they are because of Josh Allen. So how could you call that overrated? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, I lost Anthony real quick here. So we're going to take a quick break and come back right after this message. All right, I'm back again with Anthony Marino. A little bit of technical difficulties here. That's what happens. When you do these remote shows and when we're in different areas, internet shit happens way too often, but it is what it is. Anyway, we were just dispelling the idiotic Josh Allen overrated sentiments. It's just absurd. Let's go here as we wind down. The season's almost here, dude. Right now as things stand, okay, so OTAs, minicamp, the whole offseason's over, training camp's over, the preseason's over, minus 1 or 2 adjustments probably. You know what the 53-man roster is looking like. What do you like right now and dislike most about this football team? Let's start with what you like. What do you like most about the Buffalo Bills as we're barely a week or so away from the start of the regular season?
What I like most is the defensive line. Daquan Jones back. Ed Oliver looking good. Gregory Rousseau, right? One guy that when you talk about, does the preseason matter? Well, in 10 snaps against the Pittsburgh Steelers, he was an absolute menace. I've always liked AJ Epinesa, and I'll say this, I got a little bit of optimism around Von Miller, right? Not that I'm expecting to be Hall of Famer Von Miller, but definitely more productive than last season. And I think you talk about that, you talk about some of the depth. We've talked about some of the upgrades that they made at their backups, especially at defensive tackle this season. I want to see that defensive line get after it. I've got some optimism there that I think they will. So that's what I like best right now about the team. There's some other things that I can look to. Of course, I'm not talking about Josh Allen here. Like that's too easy to talk about. But that defensive line, I want to see what they can do.
I'm with you when it comes to likes. Yeah, of course, Josh Allen, duh. What I like about this team is I think the offense as a whole is not talked about enough. We spend too much time talking about the wide receivers, too much time, which by the way is not deep and there's no studs, but they also don't suck. And Curtis Samuel and Khalil Shakir are 2 very able wide receivers right now. Not to mention what Keon Coleman potentially might be, but even if you take that aside, I like the running backs a lot. James Cook is a good running back. He makes mistakes. Hopefully he can correct those. Don't drop the football out of the flats. Don't cost your team 3 touchdowns. And if he does, I like Ray Davis plenty. I've been really impressed with him. I liked him pre-draft. I've liked him all summer long. I liked what I saw against the Pittsburgh Steelers with the starters running for tough yards. He's got good hands out of the backfield. He can pass block. He's, to me, a younger, upgraded Latavius Murray. And I don't hate Ty Johnson at all either. And then, of course, Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox, you got to mention Dawson Knox. You were right earlier as well. So I think this offense as a whole is a lot better than almost everyone gives credit for, except for Mina Kimes, because she did say by the second half of the season, she wouldn't be surprised if the Bills offense was as good as anybody in the NFL. So props to Mina for pointing that out. So those are things that we like. Right now, what is something or a few things about this team that like you dislike the most, or at least you have the biggest concerns, we should say, about right now?
And it's a cop-out because of the injuries, but just, when you talk about linebacker, it's like, Matt Milano he's a heartbeat of the Buffalo Bills defense, right? I mean, the guy makes plays. And listen, I've got some optimism around Dorian Williams. I want to see what this guy can do. I hope he gets the opportunity to, kind of work through some things, and there might be some mistakes early on. But to me, that's the biggest concern, because it's like, Matt Milano is so underrated, I think, on the national spectrum. And for such a good player that he is, I know there's some, thought like, hey, do you get him back in December? That could be great. But, kind of along those lines, it's just, he's too important. You lose someone at that level. So to me, that's just kind of a, punch in the gut too soon. And that, I hope it doesn't come back to bite you.
Sure. I would say for me, one of my biggest dislikes, if not my biggest dislike on this team right now, is something that hopefully doesn't matter, because with quarterback, obviously if it matters, you're screwed, but that's hopefully not going to come to fruition. But the offensive line depth on this team right now, there is zero proven starting depth on this line right now. They got 4 backups, Alec Anderson, Ryan Vandermark, who have, they've been in the system now for a while, but they haven't played much at all in games. And then you got 2 little rookies, not even blue chip guys either, a 5th and a 6th rounder. Props to them for making the team, Grable and Van Pran Granger. But that is a very thin and inexperienced offensive line depth unit. La'el Collins, they hoped he would be something, but he was cooked. He was terrible. Will Clapp's on the practice squad. He's got some starting experience. But last year, the Bills, all 5 guys played all 17 games. That don't happen often. You can't count on that. So some of these guys are going to get pressed into action, and you got to hope that they're up to task. And then the other thing is, we talked safeties earlier. We're talking about the injuries, the positional battles. I'm going to be honest with you. I am not sold on Taylor Rapp, who's healthy. I have my concerns about him. I've talked to other people who feel the same. I know Bruce Nolan had a pretty long diatribe on this show not all that long ago about his concerns with Taylor Rapp. So I am concerned about the safety position, but not only because of the injuries, primarily because of the injuries, but also because of I'm just not too sold on Taylor Rapp. What? You brought up Dorian Williams. Go ahead.
I was going to say, though, I'm going to be honest. I kind of blacked out for a second. I'm not one to jump down your throat. When you started talking about the offensive line, you said something. I thought you were going to say your biggest concern was Mitch Trubisky at backup quarterback. And I was ready to pounce. It was just like, Pat, if you talk about everything going on with this team, if you're going to tell me your biggest concern is Mitch Trubisky, I'm like, come on. And so I sort of everything that you were saying there as it talks about the offensive line, it took me a couple seconds, and I don't know if those watching on YouTube saw the look on my face, but I was ready. I was ready.
I'm going to give you a hot take. I don't think Mitch Trubisky is going to play a regular season snap for the Bills. And that's probably going to be because I don't think he's going to be on the Bills. I think Mike White's going to end up being the number 2 when it's all said and done. But no, I'm talking about like Deion Dawkins or Spencer Brown or Osiris Torrance, McGovern. Yeah. Somebody's due to get banged up, nicked up, and miss a week or longer. Obviously, you hope not, but it's probably going to happen, and I'm concerned about that. I haven't thought much about Dorian Williams. I really hope he's up to task as well. He could be one of those guys where 6 months from now, you'll be like, wow, what a revelation he was. Thank God the Bills took a backup offensive linebacker 2 years ago when everybody was pissed about it. When you got Matt Milano and you're like, why the hell do you take a backup offensive linebacker? We need receivers, receiver train. So you could be talking about him that way, or dude just plays. He's got all the natural physical skills in the world, but he just plays dumb, and he's killing this team. And they had to go to somebody else, Deion Jones off the practice squad, something, because this guy just couldn't get it done. Do you have a biggest what's your biggest X factor? I feel like I kind of just ran through the whole goddamn team right now. I said Dorian Williams could have easily been my X factor. I just literally explained why. But like, who's someone else that maybe we haven't discussed, at least not much right now, that you think could be a pretty big X factor on this football team?
Curtis Samuel.
Good
100% for me, Curtis Samuel. And it's not flashy. You know, it doesn't have like, it could be easy to talk about Keon Coleman because it's like he's been just a fun story. But Curtis Samuel is that guy. And I say that because I think, like, you know, you talk about that, just like a reliable option. I'm not talking about, oh, if he's going to play in the slot or this or that, but like,
Sure.
You think back to what the Bills have not really had since Cole Beasley left, right? And it's just like, even when you think back to those teams before Stephon Diggs, of just like, here's this guy that can get you 10 yards a clip, and he's going to catch the ball, and he's going to be reliable, and you can get a little bit creative. And yeah, so I mean, again, I'm not comparing him, saying he's a similar type of player to Cole Beasley, but
Right.
you know, I think he is that guy where it's just like, hey, if you need 8 yards, he's that guy that's going to be able to get you 8 yards. Yeah, so that's the one for me. That's the X factor. I mean, listen, it's the biggest addition that you made in free agency. He comes in, he's had success in the league, not playing with anywhere near an overrated quarterback like Josh Allen. So like, let's see what he could do with number 17 back there, and obviously hoping that the turf toe isn't too big of a deal.
Am I being outrageous? Am I being maybe I got my Homer hat on right now? Technically, I actually do got a little bit of a Bills hat on, which I usually don't wear on these shows. But anyway, I digress. Am I being a little outrageous when I say Stephon Diggs is better than Curtis Samuel as just skill set as a whole? But for where they're at in their careers and what this team is probably trying to be on offense, is it a stretch to say that Curtis Samuel this year might be better than Stephon Diggs would have been for the Bills because of that skill set, because of a lot of the things that you talked about, his ability to line up all over the place, his ability to be really good at bubble screens, which is great as Stephon was, just something he never really, it was never I don't know if it was him or the system, just never worked with Stephon Diggs. He can run the football. He's like a completely souped up Isaiah McKenzie to me, and or what they were hoping Deontay Hardy last year could be. As opposed to, like I said, a Stephon Diggs he's going to command the football, man, and that might make your offense not as good. So do you understand, like, kind of what I'm getting at here? I want to be careful because I'm not trying to suggest to people who might interpret it as Pat's saying Curtis Samuel's better than Stephon Diggs. Now, not really. I'm saying Curtis Samuel might be better for the 2024 Bills offense than 2024 Stephon Diggs would have been.
Listen, I get what you're saying, right? And it's not, you're not comparing him to Stephon Diggs, and I get that part. It's what Curtis Samuel does well, does best. Nobody else on this team does, including Stephon Diggs when he was on the team last year, right? So he brings an element that they have not had, that they have tried to get from Isaiah McKenzie, tried to get from Deontay Hardy, and they haven't been able to. And listen, you've been trying to get it from guys that are limited in what their ability is, right? You see flashes, two nice players, not taking anything away from them, but just they're not at that level.
Yeah.
Curtis Samuel is. I mean, he has a track record of success. So, like, let's see what can take place, because, again, he's bringing an element that nobody on the roster could bring to the team last year, including Deontay Hardy, Trent Sherfield, Khalil Shakir, Gabe Davis, and yes, Stephon Diggs.
My personal X factor was Von Miller, for obvious reasons. I mean, you really don't need to get into that. And then the other one is Joe Brady. I think Joe Brady could be the X factor on the team this year. We're assuming his offense might look a lot like last year or whatever. We don't know what this offense is going to look like because he's been offensive coordinator for an entire offseason now. He's gotten to put his offense, his stamp on this team, and we sure as shit have not seen what he's up to in the preseason or training camp. So come week one, all bets are off with him. What kind of offense is going to be? Who knows? But I like the fact that he's had an entire offseason to really put his stamp on it. And maybe they will start to learn why the Bills seem to be going after bigger receivers now, where it felt like they were, they liked smaller, more athletic, quick guys, but they've kind of made that switch at the position. Maybe we'll find out why starting in 10 weeks, because I still don't know as we get this close to the regular season. Last point here. I don't know if you're going to be on next week or not. I hope you can be, but we'll see how the schedules align. But let's go on the assumption that you're not going to be able to be on next week. And this is going to be the time where you're going to give me your regular season prediction for the Bills. And I'll say this, if you do end up getting on next week, if you're able to make the show, you have a right to amend it next week if you change your mind. But as things stand right now, you look at the Buffalo Bills, you could be the first of what's going to be probably 6-7 episodes full of different guests and previews of different things and ultimately predictions. I'm going to let you give first crack on talking Buffalo here. What are the Buffalo Bills? What's going to be their record this year, Anthony?
Hold on. I'm looking at the schedule real quick as we go through this. I know that makes sense.
Are you doing a little Howard picks the Bills in your mind?
Well, I'm just kind of running through it because you know what, like you kind of do with that. Obviously, you're thinking to yourself. Right now, as I just looked through the schedule, like super quick, I've got them at 11-6, and I think I can amend that because I think there's enough coin flip games, right, that can go one way or another. Sure. But right now, that's what I looked at. Hopefully, I'll be on with you next week. I know we got to figure out some days and see what that can be. But honestly, as you go through it, it's a tough schedule, right? You talk about playing teams like City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers, the Detroit Lions, the Baltimore Ravens, like the Titans, the Colts, the Rams. There's nothing here that you truly look at and just say, oh, this is a walk in the park. Like, you can say whatever you want about the Patriots. I mean, those games are so far down as it relates to the schedule that, it remains to be seen. But along those same lines, there's no game that I look at on this schedule and say, oh, I wouldn't pick the Bills to win. Like every week when you look at this schedule, based on who they're playing against, where they're playing them, yeah, I'm a fan. Like, don't get me wrong, but like, am I going to pick them to beat the Jets both times? Yes. The Dolphins? Yes. Will I pick them to beat the Texans? Absolutely. The Ravens? The Jaguars? Yes. Like, there's no game on the schedule that I look at and just say like, oh, I don't think that they can or should win this game.
I got to think long and hard, Anthony. I know there was at least one time, maybe more last year, you didn't pick the Bills. You picked against the Bills. I had you on every week, and we would do a preview, and you would pick another team. I'm pretty sure it was 2 years ago. I don't remember. I know you haven't picked the Bills every game, though.
No, I haven't picked them every game, but I'm saying like right now you look at it. Sure. And I'm trying to remember what game it was. Maybe it was like the Kansas City game last year. Maybe it was kind of a little, I think it was reverse psychology type of thing. But when you look at this, I mean, right, like, and again, all tough teams. Like maybe if there's one you look at right now and say, okay, San Francisco, not quite sure about that one, but you know what? Sunday Night Football in Buffalo, like in December, like you guys got to come across the country. Like, all right, I want to see what happens there. Like, Brock Purdy's had a nice career so far, but like, let's see what can happen here. Like, can this be that type of shootout? So you caught me off guard there just a little bit, but honestly, like as I look at it, there are some slobber knockers on the schedule. Man.
There really is, man. There's two stretches of that schedule that are going to be, depending on how you want to approach it, it's either going to suck because they're really tough games, or it's really exciting because they're going to be playing some really good teams, and you're going to hopefully see some really good football. I want to get out of here because I've been able to avoid your Mitch Trubisky wrath. And I feel like if I go on any longer, I'm probably going to catch some Mitch strays from you. Make sure you follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony Marino. And yeah, hopefully we can we can link up with our schedules next week and I can get you on for like an official Bill season preview. And I'll come up with some questions as well. And I'm sure fans all have some questions as well that we can get to. It's always good to have you on though, man. Big fan of Anthony Marino.
Listen, I told you before we were recording, it's like this is one of those things I look forward to each week, being able to catch up, talk about the Bills. It's always a blast, man. So thanks for having me.
And again, I really do appreciate you as well. We got through some internet issues, some audio issues. It always seems to happen once in a while. Again, that's what happens when you do these remote shows. Hopefully I'll have Anthony back next week. Regardless, I will have another episode actually tomorrow. So talk to you guys then.